What is an ordinary item that is overly sexualized? Ugh, tell me about it. Halloween is my favorite holiday and I never stopped dressing up since I cosplay as a hobby. But I brought this up in one of my college classes, saying I fully intended on wearing my costume to my 2 classes that day. One girl looked at me in amazement and said, "You are far more brave than I am." When I asked why, she responded how she would never wear a costume outside of a party because they're so revealing. Cue her confusion when I pulled up the picture of what I was wearing on my phone, my homemade Fallout 3 vault suit complete with armor. On a similar note, cosplay. I get that it can be sexy, but sometimes you want to make a full set of armor out of foam. Reminds me of a story I saw on Tumblr. A girl's dad asked her if she was feeling okay and she said yes and asked why. The dad said, "Because you haven't called me daddy in a while." Normally the only times the girl wouldn't call her dad daddy is if she was upset, especially if she was upset with him. She closed with, "Congratulations, Internet. You made the word daddy uncomfortable for me and now my dad thinks he's a failure." Reminds me of the night the police were called on me and my daughter when we were eating together at Waffle House. She was in high school, we had left a performance she had that night, and she was still wearing a bunch of makeup, but she was also wearing comfortable clothes, shorts and a t-shirt or whatever. Some coward called the cops after he left their restaurant, didn't ask us anything, didn't even stick around to tell his side of the story. The cops came into the store and didn't talk to us either. They talked to a waitress who had known us for a decade, because we go to that location all the time. So fortunately they just left, and the waitress told us about it. I did see the cops arrive, though. You know that feeling when you see the cops and you wonder if they're there for you? Well, this time they were. I'm really glad they didn't bother us about that, though. That would have pissed me off and who knows how it would have made my daughter feel. I remember back in high school a guy invited a bunch of us to hang out at his house. He showed us his room and talked about how he tried to position everything so his guitar was the central focus. When he wasn't around we all agreed that the massive Costco-sized container of lotion and the big box of Kleenex on his nightstand were the first things we saw on the de facto focus of the room. Big freaking bottle. When we were kids we broke into a friend's condo as he wasn't answering the phone and we knew he was there. Like fucking ninjas we crept into his room and flicked on the light. Suddenly he awoke and began trying to hide the box of tissue and jar of Vaseline. Funny how that was the first thing he thought of when he woke up. Not, "Hey, what the fuck are you guys doing here?" but hide the jerk evidence. When I was an exchange student in America back in 2002 I remember seeing girls at school eating bananas by breaking off a piece and putting it in the mouth, never putting the whole banana in their mouth to bite off a piece. I didn't know if they were self-conscious about eating bananas. Never noticed that in my country. I only use Firefox Focus on my phone, not for security or privacy but because I just want to be able to close browser and a session by doing so. All the other browsers will keep tabs open until you close them, and it's extremely annoying for someone like me who isn't a tab hoarder. I'm the kind of person who closes each program when I'm finished with it and won't have unnecessary programs launch at boot up. I work at an Italian restaurant where we make a lot of salads, and at one point most of us were in the habit of asking customers if they wanted the salad tossed in the dressing or not. For the first few weeks of working there, I found it very difficult to avoid straight up asking customers if they wanted me to toss their salad, and I got a lot of weird, uncomfortable laughs. Eventually I decided on, "Would you like the dressing tossed in or on the side?" This has been much more successful. Sausages. Also, they aren't over-sexualized and I could never figure out why, but I really think butternut squash look kind of phallic, if you imagine including the balls as one large sack, and kind of flashy. I texted a photo of a cart full of them to a friend of me once and asked, "Do you see it too?" He instantly did, but for some reason, this vegetable fruit gets overlooked for eggplant. Really? I know eggplant originated from emojis as at the time it was the most phallic food available to use when sexting. Hey man, I was adopted. Then my parents got divorced, and when my dad moved, there was a girl across the street that was attractive to me. Fast forward through a couple of years of myself, my biological sister, and this girl hanging out, and her parents get a divorce. Then we start flirting. That went on for a year. Then we finally talked about how we felt. The fucking day after we talked and decided we liked each other enough to date, we were like 15, 16. My dad makes me and my biological sister pancakes and tells us he's marrying the lady across the street. That's the story of how my dad cock-blocked me, and I was in love with my stepsister for a good while. I read this as overly subsidized and got excited thinking I would actually get to use my Aggie Con degree for once. Edit, was at work, at my non-Aggie Con job, finally at lunch. Firstly, the optimal level of subsidies is debatable depending on your political view and goals. If you believe in a free market, for example, the optimal level of subsidies would be zero. However, an isolationist who wants production to be entirely domestic could believe a very high subsidy would be optimal, or a pseudo-subsidy in the form of import tariffs or quotas. Either way, many economists seem to agree that the following are overly subsidized and lead to overproduction compared to the socially optimal point. Corn. Most agricultural crops really. Corn is just the worst. Agricultural subsidies aren't economically efficient, but they are seen as a matter of national security since domestic production would be needed in times of war or if supplies from other countries were cut off. The literal commodities can also be used to help feed low-income people, but this isn't used to the extent of the subsidy. Dairy. Ever heard of government cheese? The U.S. government has little caves of cheese due to subsidies. Planet Money has a fantastic episode about this if you want to learn more. Many forms of non-renewable energy like oil and gas. These activities create negative externalities which could actually be taxed more heavily to reach the socially optimal level of production. I just had to massively distance myself from a friend after a birth control conversation. She insisted that women who use birth control only did it so they could screw around with tons of men. We are 40-year-old women with children, and I have to use birth control for endometriosis. Religious brainwashing is a hell of a drug. Razor, hear me out. The amount of men that have asked me, or other women, if we pleasure ourselves while we shave our genitals, if we come from shaving, watch shave porn is too high. Dudes ask me to send them videos of me shaving way too many times and get turned on. My woman mentioning that they shaved is just whack. It's not sexual, it's not even only done for sex, it's just shaving and personal preference. It really annoys me. Do female nipples count? Because I still to this day find it strange that female nipples, and only female nipples, are seen as inappropriate sexual content for children. But male nipples, they are fine apparently. Same with that, a man can walk outside topless, but a woman can't. Whether it's a matter of letting nipples of both genders be shown to anyone, or censor the nipples of both genders to not be shown to everyone, I'm just asking for some equality here. It's the principle of the matter. If female nipples are sexual, shouldn't a mother force her baby to cover its size while breastfeeding it? I mean, to me, it just makes no sense what the deal is with the censorship with this. I recently moved to a new housing estate and noticed that the kids on my street play separately despite all being of similar age 12 to 15. I started teaching them a few fun games that involved groups. This encouraged them to play together. Now I get positive responses from all the kids in the estate when they see me and suspicious looks from some parents. My partner wants me to stop saying hi to the kids because it makes me look like a pedophile. I refuse to stop being a friendly neighbor just because for some reason it looks inappropriate for a 32-year-old to take interest in the kids in his estate. There would be absolutely no problem if I was a woman. The great thing about Reddit, and by the great thing I mean the thing I hate this godforsaken shithole for the most, is that you can ask what is an ordinary item that is overly sexualized, and the top comment will be a 9,000 reply thread about incognito mode, with people talking about it as if anyone gives an absolute fuck. The correct answer to this question, BTW, is the internet. The internet is for porn now. but it was supposed to be for the exchange of information around the world. A few decades ago, I was coming home from a gig and stopped at a random rural Walmart for some aspirin. The dude in front of me bought 3 packages of frozen hot dogs and 6 mineral oil enemas. I said to the checker, "He must be having a party." She didn't laugh but did. I'm still laughing. Maybe it's been said already, but I think sports bras specifically are being overly sexualized. It's so hard to find a good bra nowadays to work out in because they have all these complicated strap shits, and then the stuffing is meant for a push-up look rather than a comfort, support thing. And I keep seeing these bikini, bralette style ones that make me wish people would stop pretending to work out just for the gram. Female nipples. Just in general, there is not much difference at all with them in comparison to any other male nipple. If anything, sometimes they're worse in direct comparison. Also, they aren't always supposed to be sexual. They're usually used for breastfeeding babies, which is also apparently a bad thing to censor on humans, but not when it comes to anything else like cats and dogs. Although I do fully understand in cases where people want privacy and don't want the other kids seeing it, especially if it's done with another adult, since it can be extremely awkward to them. Besides cases like that though, I don't see the point of censoring only female nipples and not male ones, or even any nipples at all, since it's such a common thing for both genders. Yeah, a pretty stupid cultural thing and, in a little way, kinda sexist. Look, I don't mind people thinking that they can do some sexy time fun stuff with nipples, but for crying out loud, nipples by themselves are not sexual. People keep talking about different kinds of SJW type stuff or whatever, when in reality, true equality could come from stuff as simple as allowing women to go topless at a beach if they wanted to. It may seem small, but it would go a long way. And I'm not saying that there aren't other things to fix for more equality. There could definitely be worse things at other rare instances. I'm just saying that I don't think it's often as complex as some people think, and that having it enforced that they should cover up so much when guys don't have to is pretty counterintuitive and downright silly. Not that I have any problem with them wanting to wear a bra or whatever if it makes them comfortable, but come on, everyone, really, seems pretty redundant most of the time when you want to show off your skin. Well, to be fair, it's not quite as obvious as that since we use our mouths and faces for a whole lot more, but both are still just strange restrictions in their own ways, at least to me anyways. I have no disrespect to the people who actually want to wear more stuff though. I just wish more people won't have to worry about silly rules like that. I do think wearing pants or underwear should be required everywhere though, unless it's a property that lets you be nude for that sole purpose. Since not everyone has the same type of genitals, and even if everyone accepts them, they can still be seen as a pretty easy and big weakness on unsuspecting people. But other than that, I think everyone should be given the choice to wear and not wear whatever else they want, so it doesn't really hurt anyone. Being weird from a fashion sense or whatever is a purely subjective thing. Would I find it strange if a lot of people in a city were topless? Yeah, probably. But does it actually matter? No, not really. Breasts. Hear me out. If you're a nursing parent, you know how much shame, disgust and stigma can come with feeding your child. There are so many stories of chest-feeding parents getting in public confrontations with people who are just outraged that they are feeding their child with a boob. Yet, it is perfectly acceptable to show slightly concealed breasts in lingerie and swimsuits because that's sexy. Breasts have been deemed sexy, and thus they cannot be for their actual primary purposes of nurturing and providing sustenance. I'd give it's a item, but the word moist, I know it makes a lot of people's skin crawl for whatever reason. I watch WWE, and there is a guy named John Morrison who is currently going by America's Most Wanted Johnny Drip Drip and hosting a talk show called Moist TV, spraying the fans with his drip sticks. I know it has to be making people so mad. Lol. Wooden spoons. Sorry, but they simply break way too easily and you have a solid chance of getting splinters in areas you don't want splinters in. Get a real paddle or something for that. Plus you can adjust for thuddy or stingy if you want. Wooden spoons, however, are really good at helping preventing boiling pots from boiling over. The human body. Some of the things make sense from an evolutionary standpoint: the hips, and by extension, the butt, the obvious ones like genitalia, etc. But boobs, zero sexual function apart from being sensitive. Eyes, mouth, armpits, feet were just horned up for most non-sexual parts of the human body for some reason. Massage guns, leggings, spaghetti straps, especially on children, shoulders, boobs. Boobs have nothing inherently sexual about them. Are they squishy and bouncy? Yes, but that does not equal sexy. They are organs made to feed infants. Does them being bouncy also make them mesmerizing? Yes, but so is tennis and bouncy balls and lava lamps and those ceramic printing things. None of those are sexy. Perhaps the most popular idea was first proposed by Charles Darwin and later explored by zoologist Desmond Morris in his 1967 book, The Naked Ape. In it, Morris suggests that breasts evolved as a sex symbol to replace the swelling rear end of other female primates during ovulation. Once our ancestors started walking upright, the sexual organs were no longer as obvious to spot, so males had no obvious way of knowing when a female was sexually mature, and breasts may have formed as a result. Women's breasts. They were designed to feed babies and have been so sexualized that women's nipples can't be shown on TV without giving a show a mature rating, while men's nipples are fine. Not to mention fear of breastfeeding in public, etc. It actually annoys me when I see men exercising shirtless. I know for me it's not an option. Even if it were, I'd definitely be punished in some way for it. Men creeping, other people taking photos, etc. because at this point it's so aside from the norm. Sad. So I looked up what you're saying and a quick search told me that that's a normal hormonal response to nipple stimulation. More to my point though, women's breasts have been so over-sexualized that women are shamed for doing things like breastfeeding their kids in public when that's what breasts were originally designed to do. Many women have to lock themselves in bathrooms just to breastfeed, while men can walk around with their shirts off without more thought. Oh, I'm totally with you on the breastfeeding thing. I found out about the whole arousal thing from someone close to me who was both surprised and honestly horrified by it. It ended up being something she felt very uncomfortable with, and a big reason she eventually switched to formula. I thought it was a real shame that she felt so uncomfortable and even sort of guilty, I guess, about a natural part of breastfeeding. I guess I'm just saying that maybe breasts are a little bit of both. Clearly their main role is to feed infants, but they also play an undeniable role in sex as well, as evidenced by the fact that nipple stimulation causes arousal at a hormonal level. It's fairly safe. White peeps try to act like they've discovered sexual mecca, so like typical white peeps, they try to keep it on the DL while gossiping about it constantly. When I searched it a bit ago to remember the name, I discovered that they call it Nugget After Dark. It's basically just about some positions they discovered besides missionary. The couch itself is just an overpriced kid's couch. If you ever see one, don't sit on it. So it's parents who are staring at another giant-ass thing they are constantly tripping over, except this one actually gets used, and used in a way that even promotes development, so they're stuck with it for a few years. Yeah, eventually, they're gonna be like, it's a giant semi-bouncy thing, I'm bored, the kids are asleep, and you've polished off a box of Merlot, and Pornhub is always here to give them the idea. If not, lol. No judgment, but I don't service anyone's appetites these days, and the spawn have had their own Reddit accounts for a few years now, and damn, this is comfortable. OMG, I'm dying. Though, do they know these have existed in so many forms, some explicitly for sex, some not, always with that same logic, which might even be true, since the 60s, rough lol. Like, is it not an American rite of passage seeing that weird piece of furniture from your aunt's apartment in an adult catalog 30 years later and not even being embarrassed because you know it's an even 50-50 toss-up as to whether SHE even knew or just picked it up cheap from a yard sale? LOL.